The House will come to order. This morning, the pledge will be said by Ashwin Hansen and Sashin Hansen from Rocky Mountain School of Expeditionary Learning in Denver, Colorado. They are sons of Representative Hansen.
Please join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Randall, please call the roll.
Nice job, boys.
Representatives Arndt, Paisley, Beckman, Benavides, Byrd, Bachenfeld, Buck, Buckner, Winseo, Caraveo, Carver, Catlin, Coleman, Cutter, Duran, Escar, Exum, Froelich, Galindo, Garnett, Geithner, Gonzalez Gutierrez, Gray, Hanson, Herod, Hooten,
Excused.
Humphrey, Jackson, Marquez Lewis, Kennedy, Kip, Kraft Tharp, Landgraf, Larson, Lewis, Liston, Montine, McCluskey, McKean, McLaughlin, Melton, Michelson Janae, Mollica, Neville, Pelton, Ransom, Rich, Roberts, Sane, Sandridge, Singer, Sirota, Snyder, Soper, Sullivan, Tipper, Titone, Valdez A. Representative Hooten is present. Valdez D. Van Winkle, Weissman, Williams, Wilson. Madam Speaker.
Here. With 63 present, 1 excused, and 1 vacant, we have a quorum. Representative Froelich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the reading of the Journal of Tuesday, February 19th, 2019 be dispensed with and approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You have heard the motion, members. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The motion passes. Announcements and introductions. Anyone? Any announcements and introductions? Representative Lontine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have 2 announcements. My first announcement is that the Health and Insurance Committee is meeting today at 1:30, and we are hearing House Bill 1131 and 1076. And Madam Speaker, I'd also like to make a quick introduction. We have some guests in the House. Former Representative Tony Hernandez, who is an associate professor at MSU in the Metropolitan State University Graduate School of Social Work, and he's brought some students with him. Everybody give him a round of applause to welcome him here today.
Thank you for joining us, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Transportation and Local Government, we will be meeting at 1:30 today in room 112 to hear Senate Bill 17, House Bill 1087, and House Bill 1099. We're not going to be hearing House Bill 1067 today, so for those of you who are really excited about window tint, you will have to hold your excitement for at least another week or so.
Representative Soper.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to announce today that 11:45 in the West Foyer, there's going to be a Convention of States rally, and it'll be a good opportunity to learn what Article 5 is all about. So I'd encourage everyone to drop by if you have a minute. Thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, as I stand here, my assistant is unloading 240 hot dogs, 240 hot dog buns, and all the trimmings. Tomorrow is Hot Dog Day at the Capitol. The Legislative Sportsman's Caucus will feature CPW's future funding study. And wait for it again, left side of the aisle, Senator Michael Bennett's aide will be there talking about target practice and marksmanship training support in chronic wasting disease. So we will see you there.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, tomorrow at noon is the Claw Caucus. It's at noon at room 357. A flyer has been put on your desk. We're going to learn about socially conscious sheltering. I'll be there in a learning mode myself, so those of you who are interested in animal welfare, etc., to take care of our good pets and so forth, join us tomorrow in the Claw Caucus at noon, room 357. Woof! See you all there.
Representative Carver. And Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is just to remind you that at noon today we are having the Crime Victims Caucus and an overview and explanation of the notification system that's in place post-conviction.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so, of course, that is 1 hour long from 12 noon until 1 o'clock. It's going to be downstairs in room 107. Of course, lunch will be provided. And these are really, really, really interesting luncheons. I have learned a lot over the years. So we would love to see you there.
Representative Carver.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just to be clear, when your family has been the victim of a violent crime, if you have had a child or a family member murdered or raped or serious assault, for those families and the victim, they many times want to know what has happened with the person who committed that act of violence against their family. And this notification system that we're going to be talking about at the caucus explains what happens in how we notify, especially if the person is going to be released to the community. So we hope you'll attend room 107 at noon.
Representative Weissman and Buckner.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Speaker. If we could have the attention of the chamber, please.
Members, please be quiet. Members, if we could have your attention, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleague from Aurora and I are here just to underscore a very sad moment in our state that I think we've all read about in the papers. Anthony, or TJ Cunningham, was shot and passed away from that shooting over the weekend in what was really truly a senseless act of violence for no good reason. He was a constituent in the district that I represent, having played football for the University of Colorado, having then played football professionally. He was an assistant principal at Hinckley High School, which is also in the district that I represent and is about 3 minutes from my home. And I had actually spoken to him personally at his home in the course of visiting my district in years past. My colleague, Rep. Buckner, will say more.
Thank you.
Representative Buckner.
Madam Speaker and colleagues. Yesterday, everyone noticed that I wasn't myself. Even Representative Wilson said, "What's wrong with you, Janet? I can tell something's wrong." Because you know I wear my feelings on my face and my shoulders. TJ was more than just a friend. He was a family friend. He was like another son. In all the way junior high school, all the way through high school, he was at our house weekly to eat. He called me Mama Buckner, and he thought that my husband was his other father because he didn't have a father figure. So my husband mentored him. When he had down times, my husband would lift him up. And he had a rough life when he was younger, but his dream was to teach kids, especially those kids who were special needs kids, high-risk kids. And after he played professional football and came back to Denver, he decided that he wanted to make good on what he always wanted to do. So his dream job was assistant principal at Hinckley High School. And he was making the biggest difference at that school, especially with the high-risk kids at that school. And it's hard to believe he's gone. I was at the hospital with his family when they pronounced him dead. And I cannot explain that feeling to be there with his mother and his brother who witnessed the crime and actually telling TJ goodbye. So I want him to rest in peace, and I'm just asking for all of you to keep him in your prayers, keep his family in your prayers. And his family even said, "Janet, we need to pray for the guy who shot him." So as Christians and people of faith, please pray for his family, and at their request, pray for the young man who shot TJ. So if we could have a moment of prayer, a moment of silence, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Are there any other announcements and introductions? Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I just want to give a quick calendar schedule update. We are going to do seconds today up until 11-ish because there's a committee upon adjournment. And if we're not through the second reading calendar, we'll come back at 4:30 today, but we'll just see how the work progresses. But I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having spoken to the Majority Leader, I request permission to be excused starting at 12 noon on Friday the 22nd.
Permission granted. Representative Ransom and Representative Valdez.
Good morning, colleagues. Come one, come all to the Aerospace and Defense Caucus Lunch today. We're going to be talking about workforce management, and we'd love to have you all there.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And today we'll be meeting at noon in the Sherman Building, 6th floor in the conference room. Hope to see you there, and bring your hunger. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the Capital Development Committee, we will meet tomorrow morning before floor work at 8 a.m., Senate Room 357. Thanks.
Any other announcements or introductions? Seeing none. Representative Kraft Tharp. You have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Kraft Tharp will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon the motion of the Majority Leader, and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Majority Leader, you have a motion for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Oh, and you too, Mr. Majority Leader.
I move to proceed out of order for immediate consideration of House Bill 1078.
And that motion is granted. We will immediately move to House Bill 1078. Mr. Rand, did you want to go first, Ms. Lewis, or did you want Mr. Randall to read this? Okay, Mr. Randall, let's go ahead and read the title to House Bill 1078.
House Bill 1078, Representative Lewis, concerning a requirement that the consent of the owner of real property be obtained before the property may be listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Representative Lewis.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 19-1078 and the committee report from Energy and Environment.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment to House Bill 1078 was basically a technical amendment. It was one that we worked with History Colorado on to get common ground about our bill, and I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative Lewis. Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of the committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The committee report passes. To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 19-1078 is a private property rights bill. It's a bill that's for either side of the aisle. It's for anyone that owns property. It actually strengthens the integrity of History Colorado's mission on putting things on the National Register. It actually deals with the multi-property documentation form, which is where multiple properties are put together. So that's what the bill is targeted from, and I urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1078? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Humphrey. Always see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good bill, vote yes.
Gosh, thanks, Representative Humphrey. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1078. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 1078 passes. No? Mr. Randall, let's go ahead and read House Bill 1106.
House Bill 1106, Representatives Titone and Gonzalez-Gutierrez, Senator Pedersen, concerning the rental application process for prospective tenants.
Thank you. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1106 and the committee report from the Business and Labor Affairs.
To the committee report. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to just briefly talk about the bill before we go into the committee report, just to give some background. This is a bill that's going to put some limits on application fees on rentals, and Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez is going to explain the committee report.
Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a great committee hearing on this. We were able to bring some amendments. We did, at that time, discuss some potential amendments that would come to the House floor at recommendation of committee members. And we've done some extensive stakeholding with everyone. And I would like to, I move Amendment L018 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment.
Steve was supposed to get it.
Is moving along.
Can I just have one?
Okay, the amendment is properly before us. Please proceed. Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's quite a few things on here, as you can see. First of all, the amendment adds language to the portion of the bill where the committee added language stating that a landlord who receives a rental application fee from prospective tenant does not use the entire amount of the fee to cover the landlord's cost in processing the rental application shall remit to the prospective tenant the remaining amount of fee. This language, the amendment adds language requiring the landlord to make good faith effort to remit such amount within 20 calendar days, and that really came about because landlords explain to us that sometimes they do reach out to the tenants and they don't ever hear back. So the good faith effort language was put in there to assist the landlords. Secondly, with regards to inquiring into, we are removing language from the bill that prohibits a landlord from inquiring into rental history or credit history beyond 7 years, which was also agreed upon. Third and lastly is with regards to the criminal history portion of the bill. And in that case, we discussed where we shall not consider any arrest record at any point in time or any conviction that is more than 5 years old, with exception of meth production as well as felony sex offenses.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Sandridge.
Just have a quick question, clarification, and thank you, Madam Chair. So sex offenses, how long can you go back? What does this amendment say?
Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have carved out felony sex offenses that require registration, and so those are an exception to this. And I also ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Sandridge.
So just to make sure, the exception is it can go back 30 years, correct?
Representative Gonzalez No.
Can you repeat your question?
Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure, so you can go back 30 years, 40 years, there's no limitation on sex offenses, correct?
Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for felony sex offenses, again, that require registration, those are the exception to this, so that they would not be, they would be able to be considered a denial for that.
Representative Sandridge.
Well, I like that part. So, but I have other concerns about burglary, other violent offenses. I know, I guess you mentioned meth, but there are other drug offenses too. But it still has a expiration on, I think my main concern is violent offenses. So if we're not talking about sex offenses, murder, if somebody committed murder and they were out, let's say 20 years ago, and they got out of jail, we wouldn't know about that, correct?
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is an amendment that I strongly support, specifically because it's important that when our offenders reenter in society, that they have an ability to show that they are rehabilitated, that they can find housing, which is one of the #1 factors, along with employment, in having a successful reentry and not recidivating, which is committing another crime and going back to jail. This is in the best interest of public safety. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative McKean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question, and I may be conflating these two, and if I am, then I don't ask for forgiveness on it. We are allowed to consider credit reports, correct? And when considering credit reports, does any of that data go past 5 years?
Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For credit history, it's 7 years as we had in the original bill.
Representative McKean.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So if we're allowed to go 7 years for credit, and now we're saying, and to my right honorable colleague, we want to make sure that people are able to rehabilitate. However, why would we have this discrepancy? Why do we pick 5 years out of the air for this provision when credit goes back 7? And in fact, bankruptcies go back 7, but credit is actually a composite of multiple decades.
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just so folks know, rehabilitation, 5 years is actually a typical window to show that if you haven't committed a crime within 5 years, you're less likely to commit a crime moving forward. I ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion? Representative Sandridge first.
So just to make sure, you can go further back on credit report, but if you killed somebody, then you can't go back. And we're saying that the property owners shouldn't know or be able to make the decision if they want somebody living in their tenant or in their buildings who killed somebody. We should not allow the property owners to know who is living in their property associated with murder. Is that correct?
So any further discussion? Representative Beckham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so my question would be, and I'm sorry if you already covered this, is that if someone is released out of some type of custody that they had been serving, maybe 10 years for multiple violent crimes, or even 5 years for multiple violent crimes, the landlord can't look back past 5 years. And so it would seem like you might have someone who is actually in prison doing time, and then when they get released, if they don't go to a halfway house or community corrections, that they would, that the landlord would not be able to have any of that history of some of the most violent crimes that people actually would go to prison for.
Is there any?
Thank you. Just, it's a question if that is part of the reason for this amendment, is to allow for people who have come directly out of prison to be able to rent apartments.
Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you. So one of the things is that what we see is, 3 years, we have individuals that are potentially up for parole. And, after 5 years, what we're seeing as the research goes is that we don't see that recidivism as often, people going and committing crimes again. Lastly, this is not prohibiting the landlord from actually seeing the criminal history. The criminal history is there regardless. They will actually see it. They will know that it's there. We are just merely saying that it cannot be a consideration for which that they deny a potential tenant rental of a property.
Members, if we could just turn the volume down a little bit. There's a fascinating conversation happening up here that nobody is able to listen to. Members. That's actually perfect. Thank you very much. Representative Sandridge.
I'm going to try for a third time. Hopefully I won't get ignored this time. I'm going to ask the question again. A murderer murders somebody 20 years ago. That's outside of the time frame. They get released. I own an apartment complex. You're saying I should know this. Now, I could still rent to them. I have women, I have kids in the apartment complex. You're saying I shouldn't have a choice or have knowledge of a murderer, convicted murderer, renting in my property. Yes or no?
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Beckman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also to this amendment, my question would be, what if the crime was perpetrated against a family member, or it was a stalker, or something that I was concerned as a renter of a property that I'd be concerned for my own safety or the safety of others? Because you could have a criminal record of someone that years ago had been a stalker or had actually done something violent to a family member. Would they be able to make the decision on if you would rent to them, or would you just have to rent to them because you can't do anything past 5 years, or you can't not rent to them for any crime past 5 years?
We are on the amendment to the committee report. Is there any further discussion? Representative Sandridge.
I'll ask a fourth time.
Representative Sandridge?
Thank you, thank you.
I think you have a question. Let's just ask the question, please.
Okay. A tenant has a history of shooting his wife and killing her. Violent tendencies. Gets released. Has known experiences with violence against women and killing a female. There's female that live in the apartment building. As the owner of the apartment building, I should know that. Is that what you're saying?
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that's not what this bill is saying. Let me just take you through the process. I think we speak in so many hypotheticals, especially for those who don't understand the criminal justice system and the way it's supposed to work here in this country. So to start with, if someone commits a violent murder, they're going to be in jail, in prison for years. If they have violent tendencies, then they stay in prison for longer because they have a record of that. Then they go into community corrections, parole, and they still must show that they have committed no additional crimes. Intensive supervision. And then once they get off of community corrections, now we're talking about 20 or so years later, then a rental, a property owner may still see that past, and quite frankly, if it was so violent, a Google search could help them out. But they cannot consider that specifically in the housing application. Now, there are more factors. Does a person who's been in prison for 30 years have credit? Doubtful. Do they have a rental history? Not if you don't consider DOC. So there are many other things that can be considered when you talk about placement. Family safety? This does not say that you can't not place someone because of family safety. So I just think we should obscure the message, and we should ensure that people can re-enter in society in the way that we are intending them to. If we are saying that someone should be in jail, in prison forever, then we should keep them in prison forever. But folks who are coming back into society deserve a chance to live, support themselves and their families, and have shelter over their heads. I ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Thank you. We are on L018, the amendment to the committee report. Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just reading the words there. So if, let's just say a normal, and let's get into a real world situation. Somebody gets arrested for homicide. It gets plead down to voluntary manslaughter. They get out in 15, 20 years. And they were in, for 15, 20 years, they were in criminal college, in my opinion. So they get out. They haven't been around women for 15 years unless it is a guard. Let me ask a different question since this one is not liked. The question is, let's say there's a Google search. The owner of the property does a Google search, finds out person is murdered, killed his wife, violent, and decides not to rent to that person. Is that okay, or are they liable?
Representative Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on this. Is there any protections from litigation for landlords? So say we have someone who actually, you're saying we can see the criminal history but can't be used as criteria. So if they're able to see it but they can't use it as criteria, but say they deny the application based upon some other reason, and the person who is denied then comes back and sues, is there any prevention, a clear-cut way that they can prevent lawsuits from coming to them if they deny it for other reasons, like an affirmative defense, anything of that nature?
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I'm not getting a question to my answer, it concerns me. I think that might mean no, which means that we would open up landlords to additional litigation, unfounded litigation, which we all know when we open up more litigation, what does that do? That makes Colorado less affordable because people are going to have to raise their prices. These fees and these lawsuits are all going to get rolled into the price and the cost of living in Colorado. And that's what we see over and over in Colorado is policies like this being pushed forward that nickel and dime the citizens of our state. And that's what concerns me.
Thank you. Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
And you too, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have rental properties. And every time I put a rental property on the market, the people in the neighborhood are concerned because it's a rental property. They want to know as a landlord, am I going to protect the property? Am I going to keep it up? Am I going to be a slumlord that collects rent and allows the property to deteriorate and drag down the value of their properties? And I have to go out and make a commitment to those folks that I'm going to be a good steward of that rental property. If I qualify a tenant, non-discriminatory qualification, but if there's a tenant that has a criminal history that the neighborhood is concerned about, I have to take that into consideration because I'm a viable part of that community now as a property owner. And the community has to be comfortable that I am managing that property in the most appropriate way. And so taking away the discretion when someone has a criminal history and my evaluation of that in that community harms the community. Please vote no on this amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Sane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I have some questions, especially since this is a lengthy amendment and it was just provided to us. But one of the things I see on there is the landlord may not assess, as far as criminal history, 5 years prior to the application. So I guess I had another question, if it hasn't been brought up yet, is can that landlord not consider if he finds that prospective tenant has trashed another property, has done something to another property? That's another question I have.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Sane.
Just one more. So even if the landlord considers some of these other arrest records, I think I bring up the same question as Representative Neville, and I know the landlords and I know a lot of the people who have properties not only in my district, across Colorado. These are families that maybe have one or two rental properties, and they will be disproportionately affected by this particular bill, especially by this particular amendment. I'm not sure I see protection from lawsuits if they do consider somebody with a sexual assault history or anything like that. So I would like to see some kind of protection for that if they have to, if there is that consideration.
Any further discussion? Representative Buck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have a question in regards to what is considered good faith, and can I get a definition of what is good faith and how is that enforced and how is that being used and who's good faith? Again, we're talking about different levels of what is considered good faith.
Thank you, Representative. We're on the amendment to House Bill 1106. Is there any further discussion or to the committee report? Representative Beckman, do you have a... Okay, are you ready to be able to speak at the well, Representative Beckman? Representative Beckman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move L022 and ask that it be displayed.
L022 is properly displayed. Please proceed.
Thank you. This does an amendment to the last amendment. It would focus on offenses against the person and homicide and related offenses such as murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, criminally negligent homicide, first-degree murder of a firefighter, a police officer, a medical service provider. It would also include kidnapping, internet luring of a child, enticement of a child, false imprisonment or kidnapping, and human trafficking. I think that is also very important that we understand the criminal history of someone that a renter is renting to for not only the safety of those who live in their apartment complex or their rentals, but also because this is private property, and I do believe that it is important that understanding some of these very, very violent crimes against firefighters, police officers, doctors, murder in the first degree, offenses against persons that are extremely violent, the landlord should also be allowed to look at that criminal history. And I would ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Do we have any further discussion on L022? This is an amendment to the committee report. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee stand in a brief recess to discuss the amendment.
We will go into recess. Oops. The House will come back to order. We are on L022, which is the amendment to the committee report. Is there any further discussion? Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I accept this as a reasonable amendment. I urge an aye vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of L022, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment passes. We are now back to L018. Is there any further discussion on L018? Seeing none, all those in favor of L018, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. L018 passes. We are back to the committee report. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee report to House Bill 1106.
Any further discussion on the committee report? Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, we're all aware of problem facing Coloradans. People are getting priced out of their homes due to increased rent. In committee, we heard from witness after witness that took us line by line through the bill and explained clearly how the bill would increase staff time, lawsuit risks, and costs. And there's one particular section of the bill that worries me that it will increase rents for those living in apartments dramatically, and so I move.
Representative Van Winkle, we are on the committee report, not on the bill.
That's right, Madam Chair, and so I move amendment to the committee report L020.
Okay. L020 is a little fuzzy, but properly displayed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And what this does is it strikes the portion of the bill that requires huge fees to be paid and court costs, which will be added up and will increase the cost of rent to Colorado renters. I ask for a yes vote.
Any further discussion on L020? Representative Gonzalez-Gutierrez.
This is an unfriendly amendment. I ask you to vote no on this.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The amendment fails. We are back to the committee report. Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, all those in favor of the committee report, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The committee report passes. We're to the bill. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let's go talk about the bill now. The bill, to summarize, you may refer to the following language of the bill summary, which I've looked at here. The bill states that a landlord may not charge a prospective tenant a rental application fee unless the landlord uses the entire amount of the fee to cover the landlord's costs in processing the rental application. A landlord may not charge a prospective tenant a rental fee that is different from the amount of a rental fee that they charge another prospective tenant who applies to rent the same dwelling unit, or if the landlord offers more than one dwelling unit for rent at the same time as other dwelling units are offered. There's a few bad actors out there that are charging way too much on these application fees, and they're making profits on these, and this is really not helping out our housing crisis that we have right now. We need to make sure that the application fees are a normal amount that's actually commensurate to what they're actually being paid for to get these things done. The bill requires the landlord to provide any prospective tenant who has paid the rental application fee either a disclosure of the landlord's anticipated expenses for which the fee will be used, or an itemization of the landlord's actual expenses occurred. The bill states that if the landlord uses rental history or credit history as a criteria of consideration, the landlord shall not consider any rental history or credit history beyond 7 years immediately preceding the date of the application. And finally, the bill states that the landlord who violates any of the requirements created by the bill may be liable for damages to the person who charged the rental application fee.
Thank you, Representative Titone. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1106? Seeing none, Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move L021 and ask that it be displayed.
And L021. L021 is properly displayed. Representative Sane, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move L024 and ask that it be properly displayed as a substitute amendment to L021.
L024 is properly displayed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reading this bill and talking to a lot of the families around Colorado that own either single-family properties that do rentals or even have small complexes, there's a couple things that came to my attention. I think it's irresponsible to move this policy forward as far-reaching as it is going to be without some kind of study on the potential effects, particularly on minority and low-income populations. To that effect, Madam Chair, I'm going to read you a comment from one of our constituents. This person borders my district on Weld and Boulder County. And here's what she has to say. The current laws of Colorado regarding the 3-day notice process, followed by several steps towards eviction, are fair for both landlords and tenants, she writes. It helps to keep both parties honest and encourages following ethical practices. We do not need to adopt California-style laws that favor tenants and hurt landlords, which is what lengthening the notice time would do. Please listen to my position. I am a retired public school teacher and a landlord. I have a small rental property business. I provide affordable, sound, safe, clean, and up-to-date units for families and singles in Longmont and Loveland. While the rents around me have gone up astronomically, I have resisted raising rents because I have good tenants who take reasonable care of the property and whose incomes would not have gone up in proportion to the area rent increases. Raising rents would either price some of my current tenants out or force them to move in with more people to help pay the rent, neither of which would be good for the neighborhoods or the property itself. While I've had to raise some rents due to property tax increases, renovations, and other expenses, I do not want to have to raise rents just to pay for the extra time and lost rents resulting from increased days added to a 3-day notice. Let me explain. I have, thankfully, only had the experience of needing to evict tenants very few times, but I do know the process in Boulder and Larimer counties. At best, the process is lengthy and costly, even without attorney fees. Here's the process. A 3-day notice given primarily due to non-payment of rent or breach of the lease, damage to property, presence of illegal drugs, or other such conditions needing immediate correction. Once a 3-day notice is given, any partial payment of rent halts the process. Another 3-day notice would be given regarding the remaining rent. The 3-day notice is the first step towards legal eviction, so payment halts that process. If the payment is not made or conditions breaching the lease are not corrected, the landlord must then file an FED, federal entry and detainer, with the court, wait a specific time, and have all court forms delivered to the tenant by both process server and certified mail. At the least, filing and delivery will take approximately 2 weeks before a court date is reached. Once the case goes before a judge, if the judge finds in favor of the landlord, the tenant has a specified amount of time to vacate the unit and remove all belongings. If the tenant does not comply with those court orders, the landlord must make an appointment with the county sheriff to be present while tenants and their belongings are removed, which takes another week. The landlord must have enough assistants prepared to move belongings and change locks before the sheriff or deputy can leave the property, and the landlord is charged by the hour for the time the sheriff supervises the process. The landlord will then need to perform the cleaning and repairs before starting to show the property and take rental application, even with a 3-day notice. A landlord can easily lose 2 months' rent or more, not counting the rent that may have already been lost due to non-payment. This increases the amount of time from 3-day notice to be able to show and re-rent a property, represents a very expedited process for a landlord who stays on top of things, knows the process, and has each step go smoothly. At best, you're usually looking at least 2 months of lost rent. The tenant can stop the process at any point along the way by making payment or correcting the breach in the lease. All along the process, arrangements can be made to bring the tenant back into compliance with the lease without eviction proceedings. Laws currently in effect are fair to both tenants and landlords when ethical practices are followed. Current laws are not only fair, they are good for tenants and landlords who are honest, reasonable, and responsible. I only wish you could talk to my tenants. Small business owners of rental properties are already incurring new costs due to increased property taxes, new regulations for water heaters, regulations for water backflow devices, new regulations for water pressure reduction devices, and increased insurance premiums. My properties are older, well-maintained, and updated, owner-managed, and either have low mortgage payments or no mortgage payments, yet I am still seeing a need to cut costs and manage the business responsibly. Lengthening the 3-day notice would add risk to landlords, and potential costs would have to be passed on to tenants, many of whom are at the mercy of the current market. Lengthening the 3-day notice would result in hurting families as well as small business. Please stop the legislation intending to lengthen the 3-day notice. I've heard the horror stories of the landlord-tenant laws in California, which are heavily tenant-favored. This is a small example that would unfairly tip the balance we have in Colorado, because our current laws help both tenants and landlords. The interviews and opinions shown on local televisions are extreme cases where there absolutely has to be something done in those wrong situations. Unethical landlords with unfair leases can push over a lot on unfortunate tenants. But please do not allow a change in law that would affect all of us in order to manage the unethical practices of a few. Respectfully, Nettie and Taylor. A couple points I just want to bring up from that discussion. If you haven't owned a rental property, you probably wouldn't know what this process entails. But a couple things. She mentions, at best, you're looking at least 2 months loss of rent in our current system. A lot of people can barely afford that. If this law goes in place, they're going to have to increase their rents to compensate. That is going to impact people, particularly minorities and those living near the poverty line. Also, she mentions a tenant can stop this process at any point along the way by making a payment or correcting the breach in the lease. And arrangements can be made to bring the tenant back in compliance with the lease without eviction. This is fair. This is two parties working it out, rather than using the heavy hand of government to do a change in contract. In addition, besides the 2 months lost rent, if everything goes smoothly.
Representative Singh, could I just ask you, are you talking about House Bill 1106, which is the rental application bill?
I am to the amendment.
Right, but that's the amendment to House Bill 1106. I hear you talking about a different bill.
No, so what the amendment does is we are going to change this to a study. So if this particular bill goes in effect, what I'm talking about here is we want to make sure that we are able to put a pin in exactly what this is going to cost the people of Colorado, not only the landlords, but potential tenants, especially those in minority groups or those in poverty. Because as this lady can tell you, those rents are going to increase astronomically. If there is to be a turnaround time when you're pushing out the notice, that also takes properties out of the market for some of these potential tenants.
I think you're talking about a different bill when you're talking about pushing out the notice. This is House Bill 1106, and we are at the amendment to the bill. So let's stay focused around this amendment. Representative Singh.
For us to stay focused, I'd like the amendment read at length.
I'm sorry, that is a proper motion, and I'll need to have this amendment read at length for Representative Singh.
House Floor Amendment L024 by Representative Sane. Second reading. Amend printed bill page 6 after line 5 insert section 2 of Colorado Revised Statutes as 24-48.5-125 as follows. 24-48-1.2 study concerning House Bill 1106 on or before July 1st, 2021. The Office of Economic Development shall complete a study of the economic impacts of House Bill 19-1106 enacted in the 2019 regular session. Study must include consideration of the potential effects of the bill on minority and low income populations, the potential impact of the bill on rental rates in Colorado, renumber succeeding section accordingly, page 6, line 7, strike 1, this, and substitute except as described in subsection 3 of this subsection. This, page 6, after line 17, insert this act does not take effect until the conclusion of the report of the study is described in section 2 of this act.
Thank you, Mr. Randall. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I view this as an unfriendly amendment. I urge a no vote.
Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this may be an unfriendly amendment to you, but for the people living near the federal poverty line, this is a very friendly amendment. I urge a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Beckman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a great amendment, and actually, it addresses one of the things I'm very concerned with, because just like construction defects, the added cost of this amendment for landlords and for rent is going to come with the added layers of unnecessary regulations, and also the only remedy for this is a lawsuit, and a civil lawsuit. And so there's going to be a lot of judgments, people taking rental and property owners to court for violating some piece of this law. The reality is we already have strong equal opportunity and fraud laws in Colorado and in this country. This adds so many different layers of regulations because a small group of people have been negatively impacted. We have hundreds of thousands of rental properties in Colorado. We should understand what the ongoing impact to not only those rental owners, but to the renters. How much is this going to increase cost? Construction defects sounded like a really good idea, but the added cost really put a stranglehold on properties in the state of Colorado. This is going to do the same thing. We need to know what the economic impact of this added bureaucracy and regulation and the opportunity to open up frivolous lawsuits and having property owners have to pay for court costs and reasonable attorney fees is going to impact our housing costs in the state of Colorado. I would ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this amendment. It's unfortunate that, this would be considered an unfriendly amendment, because when we're talking about minorities and people, of low means, poor individuals, we should be getting the policy right. And what this amendment does is it would effectively create a study, and that the bill would not move forward until the completion of that study. And when we're talking about public policy that affects not only our economy, but those that are at the lowest part of our economy, we need to make sure we're getting this policy correct. During committee, we heard that this would have an effect, especially with landlords and their ability to conduct business and actually provide housing to people who need it. And so if we're going to be having government come in and interfere in that process, we better know exactly what we're getting into. So I think it's absolutely appropriate to have this study conducted to make sure that we're not hurting the very people that we're trying to help. So I'd ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, on this amendment, what this does is it makes sure that this bill does not go into effect until we study this issue, before we upend people's lives, because that's what this bill would do. This will increase the rental rates. This will make it harder for people to live here in Colorado, to live, work, and play in our communities, to live in the communities that they grew up in. It's increasingly harder to do that. And this policy, we've heard from numerous folks, including tenants, by the way, that this will increase their rents. That's not compassionate. It's not helpful. I ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on L024? Seeing none. All those in favor of L024, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. L024 fails. We are now at L021. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move amendment L019. No, we just...
Is that a substitute motion for L021, Representative?
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
That motion is...
I asked for a no vote on L021.
Thank you, and that motion is withdrawn. Is there any further discussion on L021? Seeing none, all those in favor of L021, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. L021 fails. We are back to the bill. Representative Titone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move amendment L019. And have it displayed properly.
L019 is displayed. Please proceed, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment here is just going to change a little bit of the penalties section. It's going to allow a person who intends to file an action against the landlord to make the landlord make a good faith effort to notify them. and give us 7 days, and then the landlord who corrects the action of the violation will have 7 days after the notice of the violation to be immune from the liability of the violation. I urge a yes vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on L019? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of L019. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. L019 passes. We are to the bill. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1106? Representative Beckenfeld.
Bockenfeld. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, I think I have something important to say. If you could ask for order.
Representative Bockenfeld, please say what you need to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you a little bit about being a landlord and why I'm a landlord. It wasn't because I was a wealthy man. It's because I worked right down the street here on this mall as a banker, and I built up a retirement. And I was smart enough at the time, as was a number of people in the financial world, that we built up our retirement and we purchased some properties knowing that someday, we will be at pre-retirement or we will be at a retirement age where we needed an income. I bought these properties in Colorado and I bought some in Kansas City. And I bought the properties and I kept them below market when I had a good tenant. This bill is not accomplishing what you want it to accomplish. Having those good tenants in there, and I have one that's been there for 7.5 years here in Colorado because I kept the market below rent and I was a good landlord and I kept the property up. If you pass this bill and you take my ability to control my retirement investment away, I'm selling that property. I'm putting it on the market next month. You are hurting the people that you think you are helping. I'm the one who has the ability to sit down with an individual across the table, just like you folks on your other bill when you talked about someone having a credit history and having the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation when something negative comes up. We've all had something negative in our lives that occurred, but we have to sit down and we have to discuss it and explain it, and we have to move forward with our lives. Do not do what you're doing today. You have a whole bunch of folks out there who have retirement incomes invested in rental properties. They're going to dump them in the market. They're going to hurt everybody in the middle class who has rental properties and drive them down. And you're going to have less rental properties on the market for the folks that you're trying to help. God help us. Please think this through. Vote no on this bill.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Representative, excuse me, Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the last representative's words. I mean, those are the same words I discussed last year. There's a facade that, when we're talking about this bill, there's a facade that people, mom and pop people who own these properties are just rich and have endless income to take care of any speed bumps and rent not coming in. You know, when you own these properties, because I owned a rental property, when somebody doesn't pay, when the tenant doesn't pay, the bank still is looking for their mortgage payment. So, you know, it's you know, we sit back and say it's okay to, at times, we need to be easier on the tenants. Well, the banks aren't any easier on the property owners. The bills still need to be paid. And you're putting families into really tough financial predicaments. This is just like any other bill. I really like 10% of it, but it's too broad. I mean, we really do need to do something about property owners making money off applications. That is wrong. But why are we throwing in all this other stuff that really hurts the good guys? I know Representative Bockenfeld, you know, I said the same words last year. It's, you know, we have an issue with housing. And I have a lot of friends who own properties. Their properties are at a high. Boy, they're thinking about selling them right now. Buy low, sell high. Why are they thinking about selling them? It's just too difficult to consistently make money. So they're going to sell their properties to people who don't want to rent. And then what happens? The rent increases because there's, in Denver, in Colorado, because there's not enough housing. So bills like this really make it harder on the poor, on minority groups, on our most vulnerable, because it does trickle down. With that said, hopefully you'll oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sandwich. Any further discussion? Representative, yes, Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Madam Chair, sorry. Members, I just want to bring us back to what this bill is about. This bill is about rental application fees, not rent. This bill is to simply address the exorbitant amount of costs that are being charged to tenants that are simply applying to rent a property. We have heard from numerous tenants that they've been charged upwards of $200 per application fee. And then you expect them to pay a deposit, which is sometimes first and last or 3 times rent. So we are merely asking, what this bill does is that it charges the tenant or proposed tenant a fee that is being utilized to process the application. That is it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1106? Representative Sandwich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Economics. It does affect rent. This is what we're concerned about. When you make it more difficult for an owner of a property to make money, and property's at a high, they decide to sell it. The less properties means there's less properties to go around. That means rent can go up. Rent goes up, it hurts the less fortunate. That's economics. So this is not about $10, $20 associated with an application. This is associated with hurting, really, our poorest and our most vulnerable that are already struggling to pay for skyrocket rents. And bills like this are going to make it more difficult for them. So please oppose this bill. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1106? Representative Sane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And representatives, if you don't understand that this bill will affect rent, I would urge you to pull this bill. You just had an entire methodology eloquently given to you by a retired school teacher who you will not listen to. She just told you why it's going to raise rents. I'm going to move L025 and ask to be properly displayed.
L025 is properly displayed. Please proceed.
Because this is what this bill actually does. It should be called the Unaffordable Housing Act of 2019 because it is going to increase rates. If you won't listen to a retired school teacher, how about you listen to this gentleman, Russ Archibeke? He says, why does this bill make landlords out to be bad people? Will my bank give me 14 extra days? This is our income also. These are small business owners. Now are you making this bill, are you making it unaffordable for the rest of Colorado? You're going to make it so difficult for landlords to be able to rent out their single-family property. They're like one of our good representatives just came out here and told you he's going to have to sell it. That means less properties on the market. The law of supply and demand works every single time. This is shameful. I'm just for a yes vote on this now.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill, on Amendment L025? Representative Tatone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion? Representative Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I urge a yes vote on this amendment because, as we've heard, this bill is going to make the cost of living increase in Colorado. This is going to make things more unaffordable for those who are already struggling in Colorado, our working families. And so if we're going to do that, let's at least be honest to those working families and tell them what we're doing, because that's what's going to happen. This is going to make things more unaffordable in Colorado and is going to increase the cost of living in Colorado. So let's at least be honest with them.
Any further discussion on L025? Seeing none. The question before us is the adoption of L025. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. L025 fails. And we're back to the bill. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1106? Representative Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. You've heard a lengthy discussion on this bill about how this bill is going to increase the cost of living in Colorado. It's going to make it harder for working families in Colorado. And so to remedy that, I think that I'm going to move L026 and ask that it be properly displayed. Members, this bill will remove all of the language that will lead to increasing costs of living in Colorado, that will lead to it making it harder for the working families of Colorado. This bill eliminates all of that language, or this amendment eliminates all of that language within the bill, and I urge a yes vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on L026? Representative Weissman.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair. Members, this amendment strikes the enacting clause. Vote no on the amendment, please.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On a previous bill, this was attempted that I couldn't support, but on this particular bill, I do support the the stripping of the enacting clause, because I want to echo what the minority leader said. This does have the very real potential of increasing costs and making it harder for people, especially lower income individuals, from the ability of actually finding good housing. And that's something we should all be concerned with. Right now, the phrase just popped in my head: trickle down homelessness. That's what this bill is going to do. It's going to help people, or it's going to hurt people, and make it harder for them to actually find affordable housing. And I think this is bad policy, which is why I support this amendment.
Any further discussion on L026? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of L026. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. L026 fails. We are back to the bill, House Bill 1106. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1106? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1106. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 1106 passes. Mr. Randall. Oh, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 10. Wait, did we already lay over 1037?
We have not.
Okay, I move to lay over House Bill 1037 one day.
And House Bill 1037 will be laid over one day. Mr. Randall, please read the title to Senate Bill 42.
Senate Bill 42 by Senator Foote, also Representatives Sirota and Arndt, concerning adoption of an agreement among the states to elect the President of the United States by national popular vote.
Thank you. Representative Sirota.
Simple bill.
Representative Arndt.
Madam Speaker, I move Senate Bill 42. There is no committee report.
To the bill.
Can't find my notes. Go get it.
Representative Arndt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I came kind of close.
Representative Sirota?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members. We just want to tell you briefly about the National Popular Vote Bill. It's an interstate compact which works within the Electoral College to ensure that every vote counts toward the electing of the president, and the candidate who receives the most votes totaled in all 50 states and the District of Columbia wins the presidency. We really believe that this bill is needed because the shortcomings of the current system stem from state winner-take-all statutes that award all of a state's electoral votes to the candidate who receives the most popular votes in each state, thus allowing second-place candidates to become president, which has happened with 5 of our 45 presidents. Once enough states totaling 270 electoral votes join the compact, which we think will be about 20 to 25 states, the agreement would only then go into effect, and then the states would award their respective electoral votes to the presidential candidate who wins the most votes out of all 50 states and the District of Columbia. This bill is about making sure that every vote is equal and matters in every presidential election, no matter where the voters live. And I really want to underscore that. No matter where a voter lives, their vote should count equally. Not only have 5 of our 45 presidents come in second place in the popular vote and still become president twice in the last 2 decades, we've also had 5 near misses since World War II. Shifts in just a few thousand votes in key battleground states could have changed the outcome of elections in 5 other years, allowing the candidate who won the national popular vote to lose the Electoral College. And if we continue with the current system, we'll continue to have second-place candidates becoming president, which will continue to undermine the faith of the American electorate that their votes matter.
Representative Arndt?
Thank you. I think we might be having a robust debate, which we can bring out some additional points, but I do think it's 172 electoral votes. States representing that many votes have already opted into this agreement. We have 98 more to go. Colorado has 9 electoral votes. If we pass this in it passed the Senate, if we pass it in the House and the governor signs it, we will be adding about not quite 10% more. So we'll be pledging our 9 electoral votes. It is important to note this agreement will not go into effect until enough states have passed this that they total 270 electoral votes. That's another Democratic control. The other thing is this does not take down the Electoral College. Wyoming, for example, has 586,000 people, and they have 3 electoral votes. We have 10 times the population. We have only 3 times the electoral votes. We would stay with 9. They would stay with 3. So what we're doing is pledging our vote, every single person's vote counts, okay? So those votes are totaled on a national level, and our 9 votes are pledged to the person who wins. So I believe from the bottom of my heart, this enfranchises people. If you look at the 12 battleground states right now, they have higher voter turnout. They get about 7% more federal funds. They get more waivers from No Child Left Behind. They get more presidential visits. People state that California will be drawing this whole thing. About 38% of all registered voters in California are Republicans. Their votes will count for the first time in recent memory, okay? So a liberal or a Democrat in Indiana's vote will count, a Republican's vote will count in a liberal state. Right now, would you like to make that point?
Representative Sirota?
Well, you may hear arguments that this bill would then give away our votes to someone else. And I just want to make clear, under the current system, those Republican votes in the 2016 election, they weren't actually given away. They were given to the person that they didn't vote for in the Electoral College. This bill makes it so that every single person's vote in Colorado and across the country would count equally toward the person that they actually voted for.
Thank you. Representative Arndt.
And one more thing I'd like you to sort of think about is if we had the national popular vote system now where every vote counted, the votes were totaled, and we were electing our President of the United States as United States citizens, and we had that system now, and we are up here proposing to you the opposite, And we were saying, hey, you know what? Let's not do it that way. Let's have 12 battleground states choose. Let's have a Republican vote in Colorado be pledged to Hillary, which is what happened last time. Let's have this system. Let's have some states get more money than other states. Let's have some votes count more than other votes. I honestly think the people would think that we were proposing something that was absolutely anti-democratic. What we're trying to do is bring the United States into the future using the laws that were established in the Constitution to move our country forward. So we would appreciate an aye vote.
Thank you. Let's let the robust discussion begin. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this was a very robust discussion. In committee, I made the remark that I was actually grateful for this discussion. This is one of the few policy discussions that I think is actually quite exciting. I think it allows for some of our more, political nerdy tendencies to come out, so we can talk about the merits of our current system versus this system. So in that regard, I thank you for the debate. However, I could not get there for a couple reasons. While the bill would still keep intact the Electoral College, it does, in effect, undermine the purpose of the Electoral College. And I think that's an important point to be made here. This is sort of an end run around the, not sort of, it is an end run around the Constitution, but it's also an end run around the amendment process. Right now, if we want to be able to change how we do these elections, we have Article 5 in the United States Constitution that lays out, two processes. Congress can obviously offer their own amendment proposal, which would then be sent to the states, right? That would have to be ratified by, I believe, 3/4 of those states. And the other process is a convention of the states, right? So if we don't like how our president is elected, that's the route to take. Not going behind that and proposing a interstate compact that would pledge electoral votes based off of a national popular vote. And that's why I think you're hearing the argument of why California, New York, or other large population centers, why you're hearing opponents of this bill saying that they're going to be the ones that are determining votes from Colorado. That's very problematic. And so this issue of enfranchisement, I certainly understand it, but I simply disagree with it. If we were really concerned about enfranchising the votes of Republicans that didn't see their candidate win the electoral votes here in Colorado in 2016 or 2012 or 2008, then a much better system would be simply to allocate those based off of congressional districts, right? Where the Democrat candidate will win some electoral votes based off of the totals in Democrat-leaning congressional districts and vice versa with a Republican candidate. That's one way to address this issue of enfranchisement. So on that argument, I don't think this bill is necessary. But there's this overall argument about a direct national popular vote that I think we're trying to avoid, right? So we had this discussion when our framers decided to debate on this very issue of how we elect our national leader. This came up. Should we do it through a direct popular vote, or should we have, this system, the Electoral College, in place? And ultimately, the framers of our country decided that it was best to put in a system where all states, big and small, had a voice in the process of electing our national leader. And that's important to maintain. Colorado is not the largest state, not by a long shot in terms of population. If you look at Los Angeles County, for instance, that's at about 10 million people. If you're a presidential candidate and you're trying to win, the national popular vote, you're probably not coming to Colorado, or at least not first. You're going to go to these large population centers and try to win those votes. And so, in effect, we have the potential here to have places like California, New York, Florida, Texas, these states. These ones are going to be the population centers that are going to drive and decide where our Colorado electoral votes ultimately go. And that's problematic because it does take away our voice. And as a member of this General Assembly, the last thing I want to do, and I'd hope everyone here would agree, is disenfranchising a whole state based off of the outcome in another state. I think that is ultimately what's going to happen, and I think this bill goes too far. And then we can get into the other sticky issue here of interstate compacts. I mean, the Constitution is very clear that before a state can enter into an interstate compact, they have to get the consent of Congress. And you'll forgive me, I'll come back down. I don't have my pocket Constitution on me right now. I'll let other people speak on this, but I'll come back and I'll read you the exact clause in our Constitution where it states that Congress needs to be able to provide that approval, because this does affect it does affect essentially how we move forward as a nation, and I think the framers put that in there to make sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves or we're not doing something that's going to ultimately hurt our ability to govern ourselves in an effective manner. So for those reasons, I ask that we vote no on this bill.
Thank you. Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I stand in opposition to this bill. I agree that that we don't want the situation where the popular vote does not go to the candidate that ultimately wins. And I think the sponsors are absolutely right. That has happened twice in the country. But I'm not sure this is the way to fix it. First, with respect to a compact, our entering into this compact would be through the passage of this bill. You know, we haven't voted as a body or anything else to be part of any compact. So I think compact is loosely defined. And as loosely defined is, what if we get to that point and we do this and you have enough states to have the 270 or 272, whatever the number is, and one state doesn't do it, and we've pledged our vote. Because it's a loose compact, there is nothing to do it. But more importantly, I think this is a problem, and I never quite understood why our state and so many other states, I think all but 3 states, two states, only 2 states vote their electoral votes based on the voting percentages within that state. So if someone won 51 to 49, our 9 votes, which represent our 9 congressional members, would be divided 5 to 4. And if every state did that, I think that is respective of what the vote is in our state. But if we do anything less than that, I think it's an affront to the voters in this state. Because if we vote 51% for one candidate, and then we put all of our votes towards the other candidate, that is not a true reflection of what the voters in Colorado want. And I understand that back in 2004, there was a ballot initiative to ask our state to do the weighted voting for electoral votes in our state. And we did not pass that. Well, you know, I was of a reasonable age in 2004, and I do not remember that, which tells me that the proponents of that did not do a very good job of getting the message out to voters. So I would rather see something like that, because I think that is fair to the popular vote, doesn't require a compact, and it is respective of the vote in Colorado. For those reasons, I cannot support this bill. Thank you.
Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Folks, United States of America is not a democracy. When we stand up and pledge allegiance every morning, we don't pledge allegiance to the democracy of the United States of America. We pledge to the Republic of the United States of America, and for a very specific reason. Representative Sirota was very accurate in describing the occasions when the popular vote did not reflect the outcome there were more popular votes for the loser, for the second place presidential candidate, and thank God for that. That is how it ought to be. The wisdom of the founders, documented in Article 2 of our Constitution, is that the states will be represented, that there will not be a popular majority vote all in one room, all taken all at once across. If we do that, then we become insignificant. Colorado becomes completely insignificant, as do all the other states. We become the flyover states, and we may as well just ask what New York and California want, because we will have no say. That is flying in the face of what the founders intended. We are a republic. I'll just add this. Aside from it there being a very significant challenge constitutionally, Harvard Journal recently wrote on this, and I'll quote this very quick line in there. This possibility of the national popular vote makes the compact a constitutional crisis in waiting. Let's not be party to the constitutional crisis that this would throw our nation in. We are a republic. We are not a democracy. The majority is not what should rule. The wisdom of the founding fathers is what should rule. Let's keep America, America. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative McKean. Oh, sorry, you were next. Representative Sirota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to address a few points. First of all, when it comes to the Founding Fathers, the brilliance is clear when it comes to the separation of powers, the independence of the judiciary, the bicameral Congress, the Bill of Rights. But the Electoral College actually bears little resemblance to their original intent, was that there would be a body of electors who would deliberate. And that's not how it works. It never has worked that way. And currently, all of our electors are bound across all 50 states in the district. And 48 states use a winner-take-all method. But they didn't start out that way. They started out, some states' electors were appointed by governor, some were awarded by the legislature, some were awarded by districts. We have gone through a process, and only after multiple elections did states start adopting this winner-take-all method. But to the point of this bill being constitutional, we actually believe that this is the correct way to address the national popular vote, because the Constitution in Article 2, Section 1 outlines that the states have plenary power through their legislature to decide the manner by which electors will be awarded. And so this is the correct method of changing how we as a state award our electors. It doesn't change the function of our government. We are still a republic. All it does is change the manner in which we award our electors, which has been done multiple times over the course of history in our states. And the fact that we have 2 states that do not have this winner-take-all method of appointing electors should demonstrate that.
Thank you. Representative Rich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of things. First off, I think it's unconstitutional to convert our electors of our state into agents of another. And I just want to ask you about this. You know, it takes a process to even get on the ballot. And what happens if a presidential candidate wins the majority and was never even on a Colorado ballot? Nobody's vote gets counted. So this will only create chaos and litigation and confusion. It further shores up lawyers having a job.
Thank you. Representative Carver.
Well, I rise in strong opposition to this bill. And there are 3 areas that cause me grave concern when I look at binding our electors under the Electoral College to vote with whatever the national popular vote is, and not what the Colorado voters did in that general election. You know, I have received hundreds of emails on this, and there were a couple that I found very intriguing, and really across the political spectrum in opposition to national popular vote. The one email said, where does the Colorado legislature get the authority to take away the right I have as an American citizen to have to vote in the state of Colorado as a Coloradan with the promise made to me in the U.S. Constitution that my vote in this state will be reflected in the national decision to choose a president. That is my voice as a citizen under the U.S. Constitution. And their language was a little more pithy than this, but it was, where does the state legislature think you have the authority to change that? Where do you have the authority to say if Adam Smith and Bill Smith are the two candidates and Colorado voters vote for the first candidate, that somehow our electors will disregard what the Colorado voters vote in who they chose as a candidate, and they will vote for the other candidate? Are you not taking away my vote, my voice? You know, we could get into all sorts of academic arguments. We could go into the Federalist Papers and talk about why the founders set this up the way they did. But to me, that is the fundamental argument against this bill. Does Colorado have the right to determine electors as far as if they wanted to go the same direction as Nebraska in Maine in saying we will have the electors cast their votes based upon which presidential candidate won the vote in that congressional district? Yes, Colorado could do that. Nebraska and Maine do that. But that is within the Electoral College system. That is an option we have other than winner take all. That is vastly different, colleagues, than saying that we will disregard, ignore, not give voice to what the Colorado voters decide in the presidential election. We will ignore that, disregard that, and instead cast our electoral votes for whoever wins national popular vote. I don't know any other way you can say it other than you are taking away the voice we have in Colorado, and I don't care if it's Democrat, Republican, Green Party, American Constitution, or some other party that will exist 100 years from now that we've never heard of. Don't care. And you know, it's an interesting thought process to me. I heard some of the commentary on late night talk shows, which I always find that an interesting venue for politics and political discussion, where a nationally known pundit said, why should Wyoming have 2 senators at all? Right? Why should Wyoming even have a House representative in Congress, as few people that live in Wyoming? Why in the world should Wyoming have 2 U.S. senators the same as California and New York when they have so few people compared to California and New York? You know, that's the same kind of thinking that respectfully I think is reflected in the support for national popular vote. And what's the answer? Because we are a country at our inception and now and into the future, made up of individual states in our federal system, where the states act as quasi-sovereign in deciding so many areas, like the areas we legislate here on behalf of our fellow Coloradans. And if we go a different direction than Rhode Island or New Mexico or New York or Utah, that's fine. That's how we set up the system, right? And so I guess I would say that if the country as a whole, at some point, decides that they want to move away from the Electoral College and to a national popular vote, I would vehemently oppose that. But if the country decides, that's how they want to do it, then the right way to do that is through a constitutional amendment, which what, members? Which what? Always involves the active participation of our 50 states within our union, right? Go read the constitutional provision on how you amend the Constitution. It's either Congress proposes and so many states have to ratify a supermajority, or the states themselves convene a constitutional convention. And what is the purpose of that? Because we are all in this together, members. The sparsely populated Wyoming, the farm fields of Kansas, the most interesting landscape of New Mexico. They protest when I call it desert or semi-desert. We're all in this together, and we make these decisions together. And that is why when we move forward to make a significant change in our system of government, we move forward together, and only after there is a consensus in the country, across the country, to move to a different system. I believe this bill is a grave mistake. I believe we actually don't have the authority to do it. I think it's unconstitutional. And I would ask for a no vote.
Thank you. I have Representative Williams next. You're giving your turn to Representative McKean. Representative McKean.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Representative Carver, thank you so much. As always, I appreciate your words. And it's words that I want to talk about today, because words are so very important. When you hear Representative Carver talk about the issues in Wyoming and why do they have this kind of representation, think about some of the issues and some of the discussions that we come to right here in this legislature. Think about this rural-urban divide and the amount of representation and attention that we give to the more rural parts of our state. And imagine the dearth of concern that we've had over the years and why we have this discussion going on right now. That we have not done our job often in paying attention to the less populated parts, the flyover parts of our state. When we talk about this issue, I want to take you all back to some of the words that informed the writing of that Constitution, and some of the words that talk about what it is that our founders were discussing at the time. And if you don't mind going back with me to that period in time, you might want to start thinking about where the people were. They were in Boston and New York and Philadelphia and Charleston. But that wasn't where all the people were. There were people in the hinterlands of Virginia and South Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee, all of whom deserved a say and deserved representation just as much as the people in the brownstones and the row houses in Boston and Philadelphia and New York. They deserved that say in their Republican form of government that was absolutely essential. So in Madison's Federalist 51, I think this is where you hear the words, the tyranny of the majority. And when we talk about what that means in a republic, it matters. Because in a democracy, what you say is, hey, the will of the majority of the people is the will of the state as a whole. But in a republic, it's very different. And it needs to be considered in that light, that it is different. In Federalist 51, Madison wrote, "It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices, checks and balances otherwise, should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, to oblige it to control itself. A dependency on the people is no doubt the primary control on the government, but experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions." He goes on to say, if the Federal Republic of the United States, all authority in it be derived from and dependent on the society itself will be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens that the rights of individuals or of the minority will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority. People, go back and just take today and go look at the parliamentary forms of government. Go look at the coalitions in England and in Norway, in Australia, in Israel. And you will find that when you look at the democratic form of government, you begin to vest your power in the last small percentage you need to form your coalition. In this instance, we are talking about the way this government is run. The reason why this nation is prosperous, is successful, is the nation people want to come to. Because what we did was we listened and we founded this in the right way. We founded it in the understanding that when we were to leave our government to just the population centers, people would be left out. How many times in this chamber do we hear people saying, "Don't leave me out"? I urge a no vote on this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise, report, and beg leave to sit again at 4:30 p.m.
You have heard the motion. Is there any objection? There being none, the committee will rise, report progress, and be granted to leave to sit again today at 4:30.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Randall, please read the report.
Madam Speaker, your committee of the whole reports as follows. It has risen reports progress and begs leave to sit again today at 4:30 p.m.
The committee will sit again today at 4:30 p.m. Majority Leader, Assistant Majority Leader. Assistant, we could do announcements and introductions if there are any. Are there any? Okay. Are there any announcements or introductions? Then, Mr. Randall, please read the reports of committees of reference.
Committee on Health and Insurance. After considering the merits, the committee recommends following House Bill 1095 be amended as follows and ask someone to be put to the Committee on Appropriations as favorable recommendation. Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs. After considering the merits, the committee is following House Bill 1173 be put to the Committee of the Whole as favorable recommendation. Committee on Transportation and Local Government. After considering the merits, the committee is following House Bill 1052 be amended as follows and ask someone to be put to the Committee of the Whole as favorable recommendation. House Bill 1138 be amended as follows and ask someone to be put to the Committee on Finance as favorable recommendation.
Printing report.
Chief Clerk reports following bills.
Report be printed in the journal. Signing of bills, resolutions, and memorials.
Speaker has signed.
Signing of bills, resolutions, and memorials will be printed in the journal. Message from the Senate.
Madam Speaker,
Message from the Senate will be printed in the journal. Majority Leader, Assistant.
Couple more committee reports coming up.
Okay. But we can even do them later because we're going to read bills later.
Okay.
Go ahead. You can do it.
Committee on Judiciary. After considering the merits, the committee is following House Bill 1119 be amended as follows and ask someone to be put to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 43 be amended as follows and ask someone to be put to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation.
Assistant Majority Leader Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the committee that the House stand in recess until 4:30 today.
Seeing no objection, the House will be in recess till 4:30 today.